Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a really unique perspective and insights that Lisa Hayashi, she's the CMO of Safeguard Cyber. But Lisa, you started out earlier on in your career. You were at a family office and you were managing angel investments for startups. You were in business development. You've actually been involved in startups through IPOs. And you actually have a pattern that you've seen and recognized that you're going to share with us today on actual growth and exits. And as we were just talking just a second ago, it's actually something that as a CMO, we need to have our sights not only set on revenue, right? Sales and revenue, but we need to have our sights set on the overall growth of the company and preparing them for that growth and those exits. So we're excited to have you on today. And if you could maybe just expand a little bit more on your background, and then we'll kind of dig into things here.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to be here today. I'll share a little bit, sure. So, I have a non-linear path that I've been on. And so I think that has helped me to gain perspective in many different areas. And when you talk about, that pattern recognition or that understanding, over time, I think it really starts with something that shaped me very early on. And that was joining a startup in Silicon Valley in the 90s when we were disrupting how enterprises networked. So very, very amazing technologists and team created Fiber Channel, which changed, networks and forever, really. And so I was very young and I joined the marketing team there. And I think I was like employee 30. And so I was able to witness hyper growth. We were on a path to IPO. We had very strong, influential investors that took us on this journey. And we had a really, really aggressive board that kept us, absolutely on target and on this path. And, I had a CEO at one point that would actually physically break the switches from other companies and our competitors. And so, it really shaped me to understand what it took to drive excellence and to, to be on that path to hyper growth, to an exit, which we did achieve. And it was very exciting. And as a very young person, I was able to witness and watch firsthand how executive leadership did things well. Definitely there were challenges, but there was a common goal. Everybody rallied around it and the outcome was excellent. And I think that was a really fun way to start off my career and very, it drove a lot of insights for me that helped shape me. So,
and how does that, if you could maybe today as a CMO and leading, the organization in marketing, how was that affected how you do your job today, how you look at your role and how it impacts the overall company?
Well, interesting. So I am still very close with a lot of the people that we did that at Brocade with. So one of the founders has, because of his wealth, generated a family office where he invested in many, many startups. So after Brocade years, I ended up working with him for 8 years in his family office. And so we started working and investing in a lot of different startups in various technology spaces. And that was incredible because, while he was a technology engineer, I was a marketer, and we, had this opportunity to fund startups and watch and help encourage growth in those startups. It was a great learning experience for us. But what I was doing was really observing, what it took to grow a startup. We had this excellent, experience with Brocade, but then, how do you replicate that and what works, what doesn't work? But also I've had mentors along the way. The first woman that hired me, she was our VP of marketing. She and I have stayed connected and friends for a long time. The reason I'm telling you this is because I got to go to a milestone birthday. It was an 80th birthday party for someone really interesting from the Brocade days. Anyway, at that event, somebody stood up and sort of gave a speech about this gentleman's career and timeline, and things that he's accomplished. And so I got to be there for that. And I think that was so incredible because it was at a moment, and this actually all connects. It was at a moment when Silicon Valley Bank was crashing, and I was very worried about, our internal team, our leadership team at the company I'm at now. There was things that, challenges that we were having, like any startup has. And I was able to really draw back to that experience that I had so many years ago about, having the right architecture, the right technologists, the alignment with product, the alignment with the growth and team. I call my CRO and I a growth team, right? And he does too. And our CEO alignment, and all of that sort of came together. And I thought, we really need to replicate some of the dedication, the hard work, and the perseverance at this moment in our company and in the world, of what we did back in the Brocade days. And it was just kind of a really interesting moment to look back at that experience.
Now, you just mentioned something really important, and that was that there's one team, a growth team. Tell me who's on that team, and tell me why you think it's one team, right? And what that means.
Yeah, I love it. So, I often go to CMO dinners, and this might be a little controversial, but I'm sitting there and I'll hear so much animosity or, frustration around the CRO CMO relationship. And, I feel very lucky that I don't have that experience now. And I usually don't when I'm working in companies. And I think that what this means is that you have to create a strategy, a plan, and you have to do that with your key stakeholders. Your CEO has to have the buy-in. Your CRO has to be bought in. Your marketing team has to be 100% bought in. And when I talk to my marketing teams and my agencies, my message always is that we serve sales. We serve the sales team. Now, when you serve a team, it doesn't mean you let them drive every decision. It means that with a strategy in place, with a plan, you help them be successful all the time. So it's not us against them. It's that more often than not, we know how to use the marketing technology tools much better than they do. So we always need to train. We always need to identify who is successful, highlight the wins with the sales team, empower them. And, when we do those kind of things, it really drives collaboration and, support from the top. The CRO, the CEO are seeing us create wins, seeing us build trust with the sales team, and that works really well. And then the other piece I think that's critical is that we are very careful about the metrics that we report every level of that revenue team, that growth revenue team. So for example, weekly we'll have goal check, and we do that with the CRO and the CEO at the table once a week, 30 minutes. Here are the metrics we're tracking. Here's what we're doing. And here's our plan for next week. And, because everybody knows the overall strategy. Then we meet with our marketing team, and we go at a very deep level of granular metrics that we're tracking together, right? And then we also have a weekly meeting with the sales team where we deliver metrics that we're tracking together, things like SQLs, things like opportunities create. In our world, we've done away with MQLs. We will only give sales the right leads that are accepted. And an SQL in our book is a first meeting completed, because if we don't deliver them the right leads, they're never going to have a good first meeting. And then we look at the rate those first meetings convert to opportunities. And it's really simple, but it works really well. Nobody complains that the leads are crud, that, just everyone knows that we're delivering them what we've all talked about many times. And
now
Yeah.
You said so much that I'm on the edge of my seat, and I've got
All
about 10 questions to ask here.
right.
Weekly meetings, there's accountability that comes with that. And when we talked before,
Oh, yeah.
it was very much about that you're very data driven. You want to be a data driven CMO that puts accountability throughout that growth team, right? Tell me a little bit about how you work with those regular meetings, the data, who's responsible, what are you looking at? Like, give us a little bit of kind of a peek under the hood, if you could, in terms of how you orchestrate that.
Absolutely. So we have a sales meeting, and I'll just start there.
Okay.
And so, like I said, we report out on, SQLs, SQL conversion, leads delivered. Also, we might report on how content's doing, all of those things, right? That's interesting to them, that they care about, Then the next thing that we do is we give them SLAs. Every week, the sales team has SLAs, and they're given those SLAs on a Monday. Thursdays, we have an office hours with them. And so that's the point where they have the opportunity to ask any questions, and they can get their SLAs done if they're struggling with them. And they're talking to each other, and they're talking to us. So it's a deeper dive into more of the tactics versus just the numbers and a report out, right? And so it's almost like we give them their assignment and then enough time to complete it. And then we have that feedback loop with them. So we built trust, they feel successful. And then we're not going week to week, going back and saying, God, no one did no one did those blog post sends. No one, did the invitations. No one completed their cadences, all of that. It's all there. We can see it all. And the beauty of that is when I'm meeting with my revenue partners, which is the CRO and his VP of sales, they'll ask me, like, what do you need help with to get the sales team to do this week? Where are their gaps? Who's performing and how? I mean, we look at everybody's performance on the team, and, it directly relates to their pipeline generation, their conversion, their growth, right? And so at every stage, we definitely can see that traction for each individual. So, we're very lucky in that we are not a late stage startup. We've been around for a while, but we've made some changes to the business and the platform. And we're very, very lucky that marketing has the tools that we do in place. And we're optimizing continuously. So, it's fun to show growth when it exists, but it's also really smart to demonstrate areas where we need to improve as a team. And it's never too late to have that conversation when you're having it every single week. So there's no surprises.
What was so, I think, brilliant about these service level agreements is you've leapfrogged a problem that so many CMOs have.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, and it's documented, that almost 2/3 of content throughout the B2B industry that marketing gives to sales looks at and says, it's not worth the paper or the screen that it's printed on, right? And part of the reason why is because they're not working together. They're not in agreement on that content, but also they're just not aware of the content, right?
Yeah.
They're not even aware of the content and they're not using it. Guess what? Nobody's going to say that was great content I didn't use, right?
Yeah.
They're going to default. And so you've leapfrogged all of that because you've not only created the content, but then you've created the service level agreements of how that content needs to be used.
Yeah.
That is a partnership. Now I'm getting the idea of this kind of one team. And so in terms of the weekly meetings and the SLAs that are constantly changing, is that because of the constant, what's the need to change those versus every week it's kind of the same SLAs? Versus, like, is it because new content's coming out, or what drives the changes that you talk about every week?
Great question. Yeah. So more often than not, there'll be an SLA around opportunity create or meetings that you need to have per week to hit your numbers. So we're always tracking that. Like, did the entire team meet this SLA of, 40 meetings this week, first meetings, right? So we kind of look at that because there's a direct relationship between pipeline create, and opportunity create and those SLAs. And that's sort of a standard one that we look at where we're like, oh, we fell behind, July was a slower month. This is what we need to do to make up for it. Can you guys grind it out this week? And we talk about strategies. And then we'll often have, an event series or something where we're like, all right, we need 100% compliance. Everybody needs to invite X number of people to this event. We have to hit this number, and we'll track that over time, but that's like the big push that we have is one of the SLAs. Another is social amplification. So we give you the top 3 posts or 4 posts that you need to amplify and, hit that SLA. And so it's just a screen. They'll literally take screenshots of their homework on Mondays and then make sure they check it off their list. And so we can see it, right? Because we have all the tools in place. The other bucket often is content. So this is the new piece of content. Read it. Read the white paper. So, read it and then create your own commentary and share it on social or, deliver to us, 15 people in your LinkedIn to follow our company page this week. So just little things like that are fairly simple for the most part that just check, they check it off their list and it works.
Right. And if they've got it on a list, then they've got in their mind that they've got to accomplish it. It can be very simple, right? That relationship that you're checking. You've mentioned now a number of times content. And if I were to ask you a question, here's the question. How important is content to the overall growth and success of the business? 1, not important. 10, it's vital to the growth and success of the company. What would you say? What would your rating be and why?
It's vital because, everything you hear and see today is around how the B2B SaaS company goes to market and what the buyer journey looks like. And it's so very different. And while relationships are extremely important still, it takes a long time for a buying committee to get to the human by choice and design. Nobody wants to start a first meeting, right? And just go right into their research, right? They do a lot of research outside of that first conversation. So the other piece that I think is really important, and I think you build it, and I think you're working on it, is community, and understanding that that's a big part of, generating awareness for your people, your brand, and your product. And so, if you're going to create a podcast or you're going to create community content and collaborate, all of those things I think are critical to B2B companies doing well today.
And if you could kind of segment out for us a little bit, the content that sparks conversations, that gets people interested. There's a lot, and there's a role all throughout the buyer's journey, which is kind of looks like spaghetti these days,
crazy.
Right? Yeah. But there's a time for product related, feature benefit, competitive analysis, like core hard, content that sells the product. When you're trying in some of those SLAs and you're trying to get those service level agreements to get those first conversations started, how important and what kind of content is being used to create that relationship, that awareness, the relationship where they want to talk to you? What kind of content is that?
So there's a few different things that we do that seem to be working. We are seeing a big uptick in our inbounds, and our sales team is using the tools in a much more effective way than they ever have before. So we can really understand what content is leading people to a hand raise on our site, for example. So we do a lot with blogs. Our blogs content is really well received. We have great read times on our blogs, and usually those are quite topical for us. We go a lot deeper, on our site with product tours. So we do that self-service product tour at your own pace. We're seeing that as a really successful piece of content. That's great. Video also really, really popular on our site right now as well. And I would say white paper downloads, etc. Anything we do in collaboration with, with our analysts or with other, security leaders often is really successful for us. So, there's so many different pieces of content that we do all the time. We do webinars, we turn those into blog posts. So we really try to maximize any piece of content that we have. So if we do a white paper, we will do like 6 different things to support that white paper. There'll be a blog about it. There'll be, a full pillar landing page on it. We'll do social posts, we'll animate content from there and drive that. And so, luckily I'm scrappy. So we take a good piece of content and we blow it out and we sprinkle it all over the site to watch performance on it.
And how important, you mentioned things that you're doing with outsider subject matter experts, analysts as an example, other luminaries in the industry. How important is it to have outside perspectives validating the point of view that you have, that you're bringing to the industry?
I think it's critical. We definitely drink our own Kool-Aid, and that's Safeguard Cyber. And, we believe in our mission and our product and what we're building, but nothing is more effective than when you are being referred or people are talking about you, or more importantly, they're talking about the problem that you're solving. Yeah. And, it's really great because last year, there was something that happened in the market where, there was a need for our product. And so we helped some folks in the financial services industry solve the problem. And we did it well. And so we've literally had 15 referrals over the last 4 months to solve the same problem. So like 15 is a lot in a small time, a small period of time. And, we haven't had a close or win rate that successful ever at this company. And so, of course, they brought us to an event, asked us to speak at an event with their peers, and they did the testimonial. We've created content with them and cited, the solution. And so it's been critical for our business to do that and have that reach go beyond just our own voice, but others as well.
Because no matter what, your own voice is still the voice of the company that's selling, right? And so it's always critical to have this outside perspectives and validation say, we're on the same page. Yeah. We think the trend is going in the same direction, right? That gives authenticity to your brand and to your voice and what you're doing. Oh, there's so much that we're covering here. What I wanted to do, though, is go back just a little bit. And the idea of the data-driven CMO, if you could kind of put into perspective for us, because you're scrappy, right? You've got the background, the investor background, the startup background, the everything. How important is the data to creating the glue between the different members of the team and buying them in?
So I know that I trust my hunch all the time, right? So, my gut or those things, those are important. But, when you are starting to work with people for the first time, and say you have a new CEO in place, they respect you. Obviously, you're there for a reason. But, for me, I would say I don't approach a situation with my CEO or my CRO and say, hey, guys, I have a feeling that this is going to work. Like, it just doesn't work out well for me. And so I don't do that. And so I've always approached those type of conversations with data I'll have done my homework, even down to little things. Like if you want to talk about, should we change the color of our logo, right? I mean, that's just a silly example, but it's like, why? What data supports it? What direction is creative going? Are we aligned? Are we different? What are the reasons we're doing this? And then you present that and have the conversation. It's a much different conversation if you walk into it feeling that you're prepared, you understand the rationale behind what you're trying to accomplish. And with data, it's very difficult to not get a head nod or support. So I just have operated that way always, and feel really lucky because it does produce really good relationships in the company. So I have a team that does the same thing. I'm really lucky that way. I have support that they come to me and they're like, here's the data. What should we do? If there's no data, I don't make decisions. Usually I noticed, right? And so I feel like my peers operate the same way at the company, which is good. So, sometimes we'll have a moment where we don't all agree on something. And so then I really think about it and I'm like, okay, I'm so sure about this opinion I have to prove it. And there's no better way to do that than with data to demonstrate what you're trying to convey.
It goes back to those CMO dinners you're talking about and that antagonistic relationship, right? Because then it just takes the opinion factor away, right?
And the
Because everybody
emotion,
can,
right?
yeah.
Also.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's where I feel like, I may not like how a conversation's going, but then I understand it. If the data conveys that I'm, my goal or my opinion is not accurate, and it happens, I'm not always right, not very often.
Lisa, if with everything that we've talked about here, if there was for the people that are heading up marketing their organization, if there was a takeaway, there was one thing that you really wanted them to know and take away from this conversation, what would that be?
Walk in the shoes of your salespeople. Just really, really try to understand what they're going through. That empathy is, I think, critical for us to be successful together. So it will help everyone remove that us against them mentality. And it goes both ways. You can definitely ask your CRO, walk in my shoes for a minute, right? Look at the challenge I'm having and help me solve it. Let's do this together. So, always bring people along on your journey, but do it with a lot of empathy.
And you can kind of think that would be a sign of weakness, right? Help me walk in my shoes, help me solve this problem. It's not, it's working together as a team. It's that collaboration, and they appreciate it, right? Because ultimately your success is tied to theirs and theirs to yours. So why not intertwine them?
Oh yeah. How do I help you? What can we do in marketing that's going to make this better? Hey, BDR, your cadence isn't working. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. What's not working? Let me get on the calls with you. Let me write that email for you, and see if that works better. It takes just that little bit that builds trust, and I think, and builds, a united front with your team. So
we talk about building trust and authenticity, right? And expertise outside with our buyers. But you're talking about doing that internally within
100%.
the team.
Yeah, it's contagious, I think, when you start doing that, and people want to be around that. I do believe, for sure.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. If somebody had a follow-up question and they wanted to get a hold of you,
Sure.
would like a link to your LinkedIn profile, would that be a good place to start?
That would be great. LinkedIn's great, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks. It's so great to talk to you. Take care, Steve.